I'm Fletcher Rhoden, and this is Quotes and Quips. Today, words of wisdom from Socrates. Quotes and Quips is brought to you by my website, FletcherRhoden.com. That's where you can find links, such as those to my Amazon.com authors page. That's where you can buy my books in paperback, or for Kindle, or in audiobook format. There's also a link at my website to my Spotify artist page. That's where you can download my albums in their various subgenres. Last year, 2024, I had a 4-album set called Quadrilogy. This year, 2025, I've got a brand new pop album called I'm Possible. Now these are available for download anywhere across the internet. Wherever you like to download your favorite music, you can download mine. But at my website, there's free music you can only get there. So check it all out. All right, Socrates tells us this. The unexamined life is not worth living. The unexamined life is not worth living. Well, all right, if you don't know Socrates, or if you've only heard the name in passing, he was an ancient Greek philosopher whom some people claim does not exist, or did not exist. He is arguably a fictive creation of the writer Plato, who verifiably did exist, and who wrote the Socratic stories. Socrates, who was either fictive or real, a lot of people say absolutely he was real. Doesn't really matter. But in Plato's great works, Socrates was the central character. And the origin story is that Socrates was Plato's mentor. So that's what put Plato in a unique position of being a second-person author of the Socratic tales. Anyway, whether or not he existed, the story of Socrates is that he was a great drinker and philosopher and well-known, well-renowned, and was eventually tried, and I believe it was for crimes against the state. Heresy, I believe. No, it wouldn't be heresy. It would have been crimes against the state, I believe. And he could have recanted, but he chose rather hemlock to drink poison and die. So, passive resistance from Socrates. And what he tells us is the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, this would have been the philosopher's bumper sticker if they had had such a thing. This would have been etched over the doorway of every philosopher's home, had they had one. This is what the philosopher does. Examine life. Ask questions. Seek answers. Once answers are found, an interesting thing about philosophy is it's one of the few things which seeks its own end. Much like a trout that has to spawn before it dies. Or the praying mantis that gets eaten just after it mates. I guess this happens a lot in the natural world. But in the human world, generally things are geared toward their own survival. But philosophy is not. How so? Well, philosophy is the art of asking questions. All philosophies begin as questions. And once those questions are answered, they cease to become philosophies, they then become sciences. So, the philosophy of the origin of the stars was open-ended. It was resolved by lore, it was resolved by legend, but only by the scientific method did these answers of what is out there, what are the heavens, what are these white dots in the darkness, half of the time. That it was a philosophy then. But once the answers started coming in, it became a science, astronomy. The father of all sciences, as my father used to say. And so, why do things fall down? When the apple falls from the tree, why does it fall downward, as it does? And at what velocity? Now, this quickly became a science, but for a long time it was philosophy, because it was a question that begged an answer. How the universe works was, a question that was asked long before the answers came. Things begin as philosophies and they end as sciences. So, a philosophy, it is naturally going to extinguish itself. It's a question that seeks an answer, but the answer destroys the question. Right? So once, if your favorite philosophy is existentialism, who am I? What is the world? What is my purpose in the world? Where do I fit in the world? What does the world mean to me? What do I mean to the world? Me, I, me, I. I'm not much of a fan of existentialism, but if that's your jam, then just know that you can figure out the answers and then get on with your life. A philosophy is not meant to be a lifelong obsession. It's meant to lead to an answer. Now, the answer of who am I, what am I in life is never going to become a science. But people either find answers to it or they don't. Some people use religion to answer those questions. So it's no longer a philosophy, it becomes a religion. For some people, they never figure out what the answer is, and it's not a philosophy, it's just a conundrum. But philosophies are not meant to last. They're not. They're meant to be, Okay, so let's get back to Socrates, one of the great philosophers. And he says, the unexamined life is not worth living. Well, this is not philosophy because it does not ask a question. It answers a question. One might say, Socrates, what is it to have a life that is worth living? That's philosophy. The answer is, the unexamined life is not worth living. So if one is to have a life worth living, one must have a life that one understands, examined it. Fair enough. So what does he mean by this? Well, he's talking about awareness, of course. A life unexamined is not worth living. Well, yeah, if you just blissfully go through life without thinking about what you're doing, without deliberateness, without a sense of cause and effect, then no, it's not worth living. Not really. If you're milling through life, now here's where it gets tricky, because a lot of intellectual types might say, well, if you're just a sheeple who goes through life being told what to do and blah, 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 then you're just not a person who's worth having around. But I don't feel that way. And I don't think Socrates meant that either. First of all, that term sheeple is disgusting to me. It's very arrogant. It speaks so much of the person who says it. Oh, the arrogance of that person who thinks they're so much smarter than everybody else. Guess what? Sheep are vital. Sheep are valuable. Sheep give us clothing to wear. See this? Came from sheep. Or not really, this is cotton. But sheep give us wool. Food. They help to graze the land. Sheep. Without sheep there is no shepherd. Oh, great shepherd who looks down upon us sheeple. Well, without us, where would you be? There's this alpha/beta outlook on life that is really outdated and outmoded and stupid. And I cover it in my book, Tracking the Lone Wolf, the Sigma at Work, at Home, and at Play. Because it's not just alpha and beta. That was derived from studies of wolves in captivity. And they weren't even in their natural element. They were in captivity. And they were wolves. So the human psyche is much more complex than just alpha beta. It's alpha beta, gamma omega, delta sigma. You can read about that in my book. But for now, keep in mind that this whole sheeple idea of I'm the alpha and you're merely the beta crew who are worthy of sacrifice, I'm the one who matters, that's a lot of bunk. Okay? The first thing you got to know is that the alpha is not nearly as grandiose as he seems or thinks, and that the beta is much more important than the alpha will ever allow him or herself to understand. The beta has all the strengths of the alpha and none of the weaknesses. If you're a beta, you're a much stronger person than the alpha is. Much stronger. Because you have all the perseverance and all the ability. You even have ability that the alpha doesn't have. And you lack the hubris. You lack the self-centeredness. And those are the downfall of the alpha. And the beta has longevity, which the alpha does not have. The beta has friends. The alpha has followers. If you're a beta, beta is beautiful. Beta is beautiful. So don't let anyone use the word sheeple around you. Okay? Now, getting back to Socrates. When he says the unexamined life is not worth living, I don't think he's saying, oh, woe be to those who are less than I in intellect. You know? He's not saying that. Because a lot of people, they don't spend their time thinking about their lives. Okay? A lot of people think about other people. They spend their time thinking about their wives, or their husbands, or their children, or their parents, or their friends, or their loved ones, or their jobs, or their bills, or their households to keep, or their jobs to have. Okay? So it's not like everyone has a bunch of time to sit around and examine their own life. They're too busy navigating their life to examine it. It's like a river. It's always changing, right? No man ever steps into the same river twice because he's not the same man. It's not the same river. So it's hard enough just being on the river and not hitting the rocks. It's hard enough just navigating the river than to sit and examine it. However, that's the dark side of that quote. All these quotes have a dark side and a light side. The light side is that even in the hustle and bustle of our daily lives, where we only have time to think about all of the needs of the others around us, and there's no time to think of yourself or to examine your life. You're too busy living it. Even in the midst of that, it's important to be mindful. These days, we like to use a word called mindfulness. To be mindful. That's to be aware of your surroundings, to stop and smell the roses, to take a moment to see the world from the other guy's point of view, not just to always be wrapped up in yourself, not to be wrapped up in everyone else all the time. But mindfulness is a part of appreciation of life. It's a part of self-care. It's a part of meditation. You can learn more about that in my audiobook, Journeys of the Mind Self. That's available from Audible. So mindfulness is what Socrates is talking about, I think. Not philosophy. The unexamined life is not worth living. So are we mindful when we talk about self-examination, something very few of us ever want to do? Let's just be frank. To really look at yourself with the eye of scrutiny, no one wants to do that. If you do that too often, you fall into a downward spiral of negative thinking. And, adverse body dysmorphia. So don't go crazy with the self-examination. Most people are scared to death to even think about it. But to be mindful of the life you're living. Am I being good to the people around me? Am I being good to myself? Am I being the good that I wish to see in the world? Am I doing my part? Am I part of the problem or part of the solution? One shouldn't always just sit around thinking about themselves all the time. That is a life not worth living. But at the same time, to go blithely through life without proper consideration, without proper reflection on the good and the bad of things, the right and the wrong of things, the cause and effect of things, the ramifications of things. To move along without consideration of those is to live a life that perhaps is not worth living. In our own time or in the time of Socrates. So, those are words of wisdom from a great man, and Socrates had one or two things tossed in there too. Okay, tune in again. In 2 weeks I'll be back with another episode of Quotes and Quips on Monday at noon right here on this YouTube channel. Next week I'll be here with my new show, Fletcher Rhoden's Pet Peeves, which will be on this channel on Mondays at noon, alternating Mondays. So there you go. You can also see 2004's run of Quotes and Quips. It's still posted in rerun fashion, I suppose. And there's also 2003's show, Tracking the Lone Wolf, which I reference often enough. It's on its own YouTube channel right here on YouTube, called Tracking the Lone Wolf at YouTube. Couldn't be easier. So check out my new album too, I'm Possible. You can download that anywhere. And check out my website, tune in again. And until then, bye, Mary.